Oh, McQueen. Crazy McQueen. McQueen and I got along pretty good. McQueen looked at me kind of like an older brother.
James Garner, born as James Scott Bumgarner on April 7, 1928, in Norman, Oklahoma, grew up in a world that was far from easy. His early years were filled with pain, neglect, and abuse that left deep marks on him. When he was only 5 years old, his mother passed away after a medical procedure went wrong. That loss meant James and his two brothers had to rely on their father Weldon, who struggled to provide the stable and loving environment the boys desperately needed. Instead of finding comfort at home, young James faced even more challenges. His father remarried, and his new stepmother, Wilma, treated him cruelly. She punished him in humiliating ways, including forcing him to wear women's clothing and beating him with tree branches. These moments filled his childhood with sadness and fear. At only 14, James finally fought back during one violent incident with Wilma, and the confrontation ended when his father stepped in. But by then, the damage was done. Shortly after, Weldon left the family, abandoning his sons. Thankfully, a new figure entered James's life, another stepmother named Grace. Unlike Wilma, she was kind, supportive, and loving. James called her Mama Grace, and her warmth gave him the first real experience of maternal care since losing his own mother. Even so, the scars of his difficult childhood remained, shaping him into someone resilient but cautious, someone who learned early that not everyone could be trusted. This early pain also built the foundation of his character, the strength he later carried into Hollywood, and the patience he would need when dealing with people like Steve McQueen. After surviving a harsh childhood, James Garner stepped into adulthood quickly. In 1950, he was drafted into the U.S. Army and sent to fight in the Korean War. There, he faced the harsh realities of combat. Within days of arriving, shrapnel from a mortar wounded him, and months later he was hit again, this time by friendly fire while crouched in a foxhole. Garner never liked to dramatize these injuries, but they left him with scars for the rest of his life. For his bravery, he earned 2 Purple Hearts, though he had to wait decades to receive the second one due to an administrative error. Garner later joked about it, saying waiting 32 years for the medal was like ordering a pizza and finally getting it when you were no longer hungry. Behind the humor, however, was a quiet resilience. He had seen war, he had seen death, and he spoke about those experiences with honesty rather than exaggeration. Garner even credited an unusual dislike of garlic for saving his life once. While standing guard, he smelled garlic in the air, a sign that enemy soldiers, who often ate garlic-heavy diets, were nearby. His quick thinking led his unit to prepare and avoid what could have been a deadly surprise attack. After returning from war, Garner tried different jobs, from carpet laying with his father to modeling bathing suits, but none satisfied him. Acting was not his first dream, but after encouragement from producer Paul Gregory, he gave it a try. His big break came with a small role in the Caine Mutiny court-martial, and soon, television changed his life when he was cast as Brett Maverick in 1957. With Maverick, James Garner went from being a newcomer to a household name almost overnight. The show, which aired in the late 1950s, was different from other westerns of its time. Most cowboys on television were serious, tough, and silent types. But Garner's Brett Maverick was clever, charming, and often relied on brains more than brute strength. Audiences loved this fresh take on the Western hero, and the show quickly became a hit. Garner's natural timing, relaxed acting style, and sense of humor made his character stand out from the crowd. Yet behind the success, Garner was facing struggles. At Warner Brothers, the studio behind the show, actors were often underpaid and overworked. Despite the massive popularity of Maverick, Garner was earning just $2,250 a week, far less than what other stars at his level were being paid. When a writers' strike shut down productions in 1960, Warner Brothers laid him off, claiming there was no work for him. Garner knew he was being cheated and decided to take the studio to court. This was a risky move, as studios often blacklisted actors who challenged them, but Garner was not afraid to stand up for fairness. Against the odds, he won the lawsuit, proving that actors could fight back against unfair treatment. The victory came at a cost. He never returned to Warner Brothers, but it also gave him freedom. Garner was no longer just a television star. He was a man who was willing to defend his rights. This reputation followed him into film, where his career expanded with roles that showcased both his dramatic and comedic talents. Garner's move into films brought him to one of his most iconic roles, Flight Lieutenant Bob Hendley in The Great Escape, 1963. The movie was a huge production with a star-studded cast, including Richard Attenborough, Charles Bronson, Donald Pleasance, James Coburn, and most famously, Steve McQueen. Garner's character, known as the Scrounger, was resourceful, charming, and skilled at getting what the prisoners needed to survive. McQueen played Captain Virgil Hiltz, the Cooler King, whose rebellious attitude and motorcycle escape would go on to become legendary. On screen, the two actors complemented each other perfectly. Off-screen, however, tensions started to rise. McQueen was fiercely competitive and hungry for the spotlight, while Garner had a more relaxed, professional style. Garner's natural charisma often drew attention even without trying, something that irritated McQueen, who wanted to be the center of attention. Crew members noticed the contrast. McQueen thrived on risk and danger, pushing for bigger stunts and dramatic moments, while Garner valued preparation, teamwork, and safety. Although they did not have open fights on set, there was an undeniable undercurrent of rivalry. Garner later admitted that McQueen's reckless energy sometimes worried him, especially during the dangerous motorcycle scenes that could have easily gone wrong. The rivalry may not have exploded during filming, but it marked the beginning of a complicated relationship between the two stars. In later years, Garner spoke more openly about his experiences with McQueen. By then, he no longer felt the need to sugarcoat his words. He described McQueen as talented, charismatic, and ambitious, but also arrogant, insecure, and sometimes reckless. McQueen wanted to dominate every scene, and was known for spreading subtle rumors to protect his position in Hollywood. Garner, in contrast, approached the business with calmness and professionalism. He focused on contracts, preparation, and fair negotiations instead of trying to undermine others. This difference in philosophy meant that while they worked well on screen, their personal relationship never became close. Garner admitted that Hollywood itself encouraged rivalries like this. Studios and the media often liked to play up tension between stars, as it made good headlines and boosted publicity. For Garner, though, the rivalry with McQueen felt exhausting at times. He respected McQueen's abilities, especially his daring stunts and screen presence. But he also saw the darker side of his competitiveness. Garner believed McQueen's insecurities drove much of his behavior, which reminded him of the harshness he had survived in his own youth. In the end, Garner chose patience over confrontation, often stepping back rather than escalating conflicts. Still, the rivalry shaped his view of Hollywood and taught him how fragile egos and ambition could make the industry a difficult place to survive. As Garner aged, he began to reflect more openly on the personal costs of a career in Hollywood. Fame brought him money, recognition, and lasting roles, but it also carried heavy burdens. He admitted that the constant grind of making movies and television shows left him physically and emotionally drained. Injuries on set were common, and the stress of dealing with demanding studios and competitive co-stars took a toll on him. Garner also saw many colleagues fall into dangerous habits, such as drug use and reckless lifestyles, which sometimes ended tragically. He credited his calm nature and sense of humor for helping him avoid those traps. But he did not escape the pressures entirely. Looking back, he sometimes regretted not speaking up more forcefully during his career, especially when it came to creative decisions or unfair treatment. Yet he balanced those regrets with gratitude for the long, successful journey he had enjoyed. Unlike McQueen, who passed away young, Garner lived to reflect on his experiences and share his truth. His rivalry with McQueen had not destroyed him, it had, in fact, pushed him to remain professional and grounded. Even in the most difficult moments, Garner's lesson was simple but powerful. In Hollywood, talent alone was not enough. Survival required patience, strategy, and a strong sense of who you were. By the time James Garner reached his mid-80s, he was ready to share the truth in a way he had not done before. His reflections on McQueen were not meant to destroy his reputation, but to show the reality behind the Hollywood image. Garner revealed that beneath McQueen's tough and charming exterior was a man full of insecurities. Just like many others in the industry, he also made it clear that fame often came with hidden costs, strained friendships, rivalries, and the constant struggle to balance public image with private reality. Garner's honesty at this stage of his life was refreshing to fans who had grown up admiring both him and McQueen. It reminded them that stars are human too, with flaws, regrets, and lessons learned the hard way. Garner's legacy was not just the roles he played in Maverick, The Rockford Files, and countless films. His true legacy was his ability to remain authentic in an industry that often rewarded arrogance over humility. By sharing his truth about McQueen and Hollywood, Garner left behind wisdom for younger actors and for audiences who wanted to understand the real price of stardom. His story was one of resilience, courage, and quiet dignity, reminder that behind the glitz of Hollywood lies a more complicated and very human reality. James Garner, born as James Scott Bumgarner on April 7, 1928, in Norman, Oklahoma, grew up in a world that was far from easy. His early years were filled with pain, neglect, and abuse that left deep marks on him. When he was only 5 years old, his mother passed away after a medical procedure went wrong. That loss meant James and his two brothers had to rely on their father Weldon, who struggled to provide the stable and loving environment the boys desperately needed. Instead of finding comfort at home, young James faced even more challenges. His father remarried, and his new stepmother, Wilma, treated him cruelly. She punished him in humiliating ways, including forcing him to wear women's clothing and beating him with tree branches. These moments filled his childhood with sadness and fear. At only 14, James finally fought back during one violent incident with Wilma, and the confrontation ended when his father stepped in. But by then, the damage was done. Shortly after, Weldon left the family, abandoning his sons. Thankfully, a new figure entered James's life, another stepmother named Grace. Unlike Wilma, she was kind, supportive, and loving. James called her Mama Grace, and her warmth gave him the first real experience of maternal care since losing his own mother. Even so, the scars of his difficult childhood remained, shaping him into someone resilient but cautious. Someone who learned early that not everyone could be trusted. This early pain also built the foundation of his character, the strength he later carried into Hollywood and the patience he would need when dealing with people like